Okay, guys, so before we start looking at the book, go ahead and open your Tuesday packet to the sheet on metric conversions, and then go ahead and tear that out, because you will not turn it back into me. And we're going to look over that before we begin. So you should be looking at this anchor chart that says metric conversions on it. I have a larger version up on the board. And let's look at these. We have this conversion chart. And I put length, volume, or capacity, and mass or weight on the same page. And you'll see, when you look at it, that this is not going to be difficult conversions like before, because every single conversion is a multiple of 10, 100, or 1,000. So you're just going to be using basic facts and patterns this whole lesson. So let's look at length first. 1 centimeter is equal to 10 millimeters. So that means for every centimeter, you have 10 millimeters. That means if you have 1 centimeter, you have 10 millimeters. If you have 5 centimeters, you have 50 millimeters, and so on. 1 meter is equivalent to 100 centimeters. That means for every meter, you have 100 centimeters. So that means if you have 5 meters, you have 500 centimeters. If you have 27 meters, you have 2,700 centimeters. Every kilometer is equal to 1,000 meters. That means 1 kilometer is the same as 1,000 meters. So that means if you have 5 kilometers, you have 5,000 meters, and so on. So you can see we're going to be using basic facts and patterns this whole lesson. We're going to be finding the basic fact, or a simple fact, which will be any number times 1 every time. And then we're going to put the right amount of zeros at the end. So you'll see how probably quickly we'll be able to get through this lesson later on. Then for volume, we only have to worry about one conversion. 1 liter is the same as 1,000 milliliters. So that means if you have 1 liter, you have 1,000 milliliters. If you have 5 liters, you have 5,000 milliliters, and so on. With mass, we aren't really going to be looking at milligrams, but I put that on there anyway. 1 gram is the same as 1,000 milligrams. So that means for every gram, you have 1,000 milligrams, which means if you have 5 grams, you have 5,000 milligrams, and so on. We won't really be looking at that, but just so you know. And then we know that 1 kilogram is the same as 1,000 grams. So for every kilogram, you have 1,000 grams. So that means if you have 5 kilograms, you have 5,000 grams. Okay, so again, what we're going to be looking for is, remember, big to small, you multiply, small to big, you divide. But we're going to be using all basic facts and patterns. We're going to be finding a basic fact or a simple fact, where we're going to take a number, multiply it by 1, and then put the correct amount of zeros at the end. So go ahead now, turn to page 801, and we'll start working in the book. Okay guys, so let's start out by reading the sentence at the top of the page under the lesson title on page 801. It says, you can multiply to convert or change between units. Well, we already know that because of our last chapter. We know that if you are going from a big unit to a small unit, you multiply. So from big to small, you multiply. We're going to be using that same concept in today's lesson. So everybody, finger a pencil on example 1 and read in your head while I read out loud. The tree in Cameron's yard is 4 meters tall. How many centimeters tall is the tree? So we know that we are starting with 4, I want you to write this, meters, and we're trying to figure out how many centimeters. We're going to set it up the same way we did in the last lesson, where we start with what we know, and then we have an unknown, and then the unit that we're trying to find. And now to solve this, we're going to do the same exact thing. First, let's look over this conversion chart one more time. We know that 1 centimeter is the same as 10 millimeters. 1 meter is the same as 100 centimeters. And 1 kilometer is the same as 1,000 meters. Well, this time we know 4 meters, and we're trying to find centimeters. Meters are larger than centimeters, so that means we're going from big to small. We also know that we're just going to do it in one step. because meters and centimeters are right next to each other. So we don't have to go, like if we knew kilometers and we were trying to find millimeters, well, we'd have to go from kilometers to meters, then meters to centimeters, then centimeters to millimeters. But we know how many centimeters are in 1 meter, so we don't have to do that. Just like before, we're going to start with what we know, which is 4 meters. And then we're not going to multiply by the number of meters in a meter, because then we'd be multiplying by 1 and we get the same answer. We know that can't be true because we know centimeters are smaller than meters. So we're not going to multiply by the number of meters in a meter, we're going to multiply by the number of centimeters in a meter, which we know from our chart is 100. Now we can just use basic facts and patterns to solve this. 4 times 1 is 4. There are 2 zeros at the end of our factors, so I'm going to put 2 zeros at the end of my product. And now I know that 4 meters is equivalent to 400 centimeters. So down here, I'm going to say 4 meters equals 400 centimeters, which means that the tree is 400 centimeters tall. Okay guys, so now go ahead and put your finger or pencil on example 2 and read in your head while I read out loud. Complete. 5 liters equals blank milliliters. So what we're doing is we are figuring out, okay, well we know 5 liters, remember liters is abbreviated with a capital L, equals how many milliliters? Now liters are larger than milliliters, so we're going to multiply because we know that 1 liter is the same as 1,000 milliliters. We only have 2 units, so that means we'll never have to do more than one step when we're working with liters and milliliters, at least not this year. And we always start with what we know, which is 5 liters. And then we're not going to multiply by the number of liters in a liter because there's only 1 liter in 1 liter. We're going to multiply by the number of milliliters in 1 liter, which is 1,000. Now we're going to take the basic or simple fact, which is 5 times 1, and that equals 5. Whoops, I did not give myself enough space. And then we're going to count how many zeros are at the end of the factors, and we have 1, 2, 3. So we're going to put those 3 zeros at the end of our product. 1, 2, 3. Put in our comma. So that means 5 times 1,000 is 5,000. So 5 liters equals 5,000 milliliters. So that's all you have to do. We're still going to do one more example, and then we're going to do the guided practice. But that's all you have to do. You have to multiply. You're mostly going to be working with going from big to small. So you're just going to multiply what you know by the number of the smaller unit, or by the amount of the smaller unit in one of the larger unit. Just like we did when we converted customary measurements, but this time you're going to be able to use basic or simple facts and patterns for every single one. Okay, let's go ahead and turn the page and look at example 3. Okay guys, so now finger or pencil on example 3 and read in your head while I read out loud. Convert 7 kilograms to grams. And let's look at our mass conversion chart. We know that 1 kilogram equals 1,000 grams. So that means what we're trying to do is we know 7 kilograms, and we're trying to figure out how many grams that is. Well, kilograms are larger than grams. They are right next to each other. We know exactly how many grams are in a kilogram, so we are going to multiply, and we can do it in one step. We're going to start with what we know, which is 7 kilograms, and then we're going to multiply it by the number of grams in 1 kilogram, which is 1,000. Using basic facts and patterns, 7 times 1 is 7. There are 3 zeros at the end of our factors, so we'll put 3 zeros at the end of our product. Don't forget the comma. And so we know that 1,000 times 7 is 7,000. So that means 7 kilograms equals 7,000 grams. Okay, let's look at the guided practice, and we're going to do the same thing. We have a bunch of conversion charts, so I'll show you exactly how to set those up in your independent practice and on your homework and on your test, if we were having a test, but we're not, so never mind about that. But you'll see exactly how to set it up on your homework. Okay, so for the guided practice, we're going to be doing conversion tables. We're going to do 4 conversion tables, and then you'll be on the independent practice. We're going to do one independent practice problem together, so that you can see, sometimes there are more than one steps. So sometimes you have to take multiple steps to get to the answer, because every one that we've done so far, we've only had to do one step. But we are going to do one of the independent practice problems because it shows how to do it if there's more than one step. Okay, so number 1, we have kilometers and meters. Kilometers are the bigger unit. Meters are the smaller unit. We know kilometers, that means we're going from big to small. Kilometers and meters are right next to each other on the chart. Our chart tells us exactly how many meters are in a kilometer, which means that we can multiply, and we're just going to do it in one step. Don't forget to put your equation to the side. That is part of showing your work. Even though we're going to solve it using basic facts and patterns, I still need to see the equations to the side, just like all the other conversion charts. Okay, so every time we're going to start with what we know. Well, we know 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers, and 4 kilometers. And then we're going to use our conversion chart to multiply by the number of meters in a kilometer, which we know there are 1,000 meters in 1 kilometer. So we're going to multiply by 1,000 each time. Okay, now we can just use basic facts. We can actually use the identity property of multiplication and then just put zeros at the end. So the identity property of multiplication tells us that 1 times 1,000 is 1,000. Here, we know that 2 times 1 equals 2. There are 3 zeros at the end of our factors. So that means in 2 kilometers, there are 2,000 meters. And then don't forget, we have to put our number pair. If you'd like to put a semicolon between the 2 numbers in the number pair, you can do that. Just make sure you don't put a semicolon where a comma should go separating the ones period and the thousands period. Don't forget that. Only put the semicolon between the kilometers and the meters. Okay, next one. 3 times 1,000. Well, 3 times 1 is 3. There are 3 zeros in the factors. So that means in 3 kilometers, there are 3,000 meters. Last one, 4. For 4 kilometers, well, 4 times 1 is 4. There are 3 zeros at the end of our factors, which means we put 3 zeros at the end of our product. So, for every 4 kilometers, there are 4,000 meters. Okay, now number 2. Well, we don't have room to put our equations here, so we're just going to put our equations over here. We have centimeters and millimeters. Centimeters are the bigger unit. Millimeters are the smaller unit. We know centimeters, and we're trying to get the smaller unit. So that means we're going to multiply. Centimeters and millimeters, our chart tells us exactly how many millimeters are in a centimeter. So that means we're going to be doing it in one step. And we're going to be multiplying, so we'll go ahead and write that equation to the side. Well, first, we start with what we know, which is 1 centimeter, 2 centimeters, 3 centimeters, and 4 centimeters. Now we're going to multiply by the number of millimeters in a centimeter, which our conversion chart tells us is 10. So we're going to multiply by 10 each time. And these are all basic facts, so we don't even have to use like basic facts and patterns. We can just use basic facts. We know that 1 times 10 is 10, which means in 1 centimeter there are 10 millimeters. 2 times 10 is 20, which means that in 2 centimeters there are 20 millimeters. 3 times 10 is 30, which means in 3 centimeters, there are 30 millimeters. And 4 times 10 is 40, which means that in 4 centimeters, there are 40 millimeters. And that's it. Let's look at number 3. We have meters and centimeters. Meters are the larger unit. Centimeters are the smaller unit. We do know on our conversion chart, we know exactly how many centimeters are in a meter. And we know the meters and are trying to find the small unit, which means we can multiply, and we only have to do it in one step. So we'll go ahead and put our multiplication symbol, and then we'll start with what we know, which is 5 meters, 6 meters, 7 meters, and 8 meters. And then we know from our chart that there are 100 centimeters in 1 meter, so that means we're going to multiply by 100 each time. Okay, now using basic facts and patterns, we know that 5 times 1 is 5. There are 2 zeros at the end of the the factor. So that means in 5 meters, there are 500 centimeters. Next one, 6 times 1 is 6. There are 2 zeros at the end of our factors. So that means in 6 meters, there are 600 centimeters. Next one, 7 meters. Well, 7 times 1 is 7. There are 2 zeros. So that means in 7 meters, there are 700 centimeters. Last one, 8 meters. Well, 8 times 1 is 8. There are 2 zeros at the end of our factors, which means that in 8 meters, there are 800 centimeters. Okay, hopefully you're with me. You'll see all you're using is basic facts and patterns. That's it, every time. So your biggest job is just to remember how many of each of the smaller units are in one of the larger units. So it's your job is just to remember there are 10 millimeters in 1 centimeter. There are 100 centimeters in 1 meter. There are 1,000 meters in 1 kilometer. And also there are 1,000 grams in 1 kilogram. And there are 1,000 milliliters in 1 liter. That's your biggest job, is just to remember how many of the smaller units are in one of the larger units. Number 4, we have liters and milliliters. Well, we know those are right next to each other. We know exactly from our chart, it tells us exactly how many milliliters are in 1 liter, which means we only have to do one step. Liters are the larger unit. Milliliters are the smaller unit. We know the larger unit, which means we're going from big to small. We only have to do one step, so let's go ahead and put our multiplication symbol in. And we're going to start with what we know, which is 1 liter, 2 liters, 3 liters, and 4 liters. And now each time we're going to multiply by the number of milliliters in a liter, which our conversion chart tells us is 1,000. I did not give myself very much space, but I'll make it work. Oops. So we're going to multiply by 1,000 each time. Oops. And now we're just going to multiply. 1 times 1,000 is 1,000, which means that 1 liter has 1,000 milliliters. 2 times 1 is 2, with our 3 zeros at the end. So that means 2 liters. Oops, we'll put our semicolon between the liters and milliliters. 2 liters has 2,000 milliliters. Next one, 3 liters, 3 times 1 is 3. We have, 3 zeros, 1, 2, 3. So that means 3 liters has 3,000 milliliters. And last one for the guided practice, 4 liters, 4 times 1 is 4. There are 3 zeros at the end, which means that 4 liters have 4,000 milliliters. Okay, well that's it for the guided practice. However, we are going to do one of the independent practice problems together. We're going to do number 12 together. So let's look at number 12 on the independent practice. Okay guys, so we're actually going to do number 7 and number 12 because I'm going to show you exactly how to set this up in your book when you're showing your work. You'll do the same thing for your homework. because since we're only really doing basic facts and patterns, you won't have to set anything up and down. So you don't actually need a separate sheet of paper for this independent practice or this homework. You can show it all on your paper. So number 7, we know we have 6 liters and we're trying to find how many milliliters. So we can actually set up our equation right here, and then we don't have to solve it up and down because we can use basic facts and patterns for all of these. So number 7, we know the liters and we're trying to find the milliliters. We know exactly, our conversion chart tells us exactly how many milliliters there are in a liter. So we're only doing one step. We know the larger unit, so that means we're going to multiply. So underneath where the answer is, the blank or the unknown equals blank, we're going to go ahead and write our equation. Make sure you write small enough that you're not covering up the answer or any of the other problems. Now we always start with what we know, which in this case is 6 liters. Then we're going to use our conversion chart to figure out what we multiply by. We're multiplying by the number of milliliters in a liter, which is 1,000. And now we just have to use basic facts and patterns. 6 times 1 is 6. There are 1, 2, 3 zeros. Add in our comma. So that means that 6 liters equals 6,000 milliliters. Do not forget your unit. So that's all you have to do to set it up. We'll do number 8 too, just so you have one more time of seeing exactly how to do it, and then we're going to do number 12 because there's an extra step in there. Number 8, 5 meters equals how many centimeters? Well, we know exactly how many centimeters are in a meter, so that means we only have to do one step. Meters are larger than centimeters, which means we're going to multiply. We start with what we know, which is 5 meters. Multiply it by the number of centimeters in a meter, which our chart tells us is 100. And now we're just going to use basic facts and patterns. 5 times 1 is 5. There are 2 zeros at the end of our factors, which means that 5 meters equals 500 centimeters. Again, don't forget that unit. Okay, so that's how you're going to set it up. You're just going to have the answer with the unit on the line, and you're going to set the equation up right below, just like this. You'll do this on your independent practice and on your homework. So make sure that you show your work so that you don't lose points. Some of you would have gotten A's on several homework assignments, but because you didn't show your work, it brought it way, way down. So make sure you're showing your work. Okay, so now let's look at number 12. We have 4 meters, and we're trying to figure out how many millimeters that is. Well, on our chart, we know that 1 meter equals 100 centimeters, but we don't know how many millimeters are in 1 meter. So what that means is that first we have to convert that 4 meters to centimeters. And then once we know the centimeters, then we have to find the millimeters from there. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going from meters to centimeters to millimeters. So we have an extra step. So first, let's go from meters to centimeters. We start with what we know, which is 4. We are multiplying because meters are larger than centimeters. And we're going to multiply it by the number of centimeters in a meter, which our chart tells us is 100. Now 4 times 100, we know 4 times 1 is 4. There are 2 zeros at the end of our factors. So now we know that there are 400 centimeters in 4 meters. But we're not done yet. So make sure you're following along. We still can show all of our work on this sheet of paper. So now we know we've moved past the meters. Now we know the centimeters. So now we can easily get from centimeters to meters. We are still going from big to small, so we're going to multiply. We start with what we know, which is 400 centimeters. I don't even have to rewrite that. I can just set it up in one long line. And I'm going to multiply it by the number of millimeters in a centimeter, which is 10. Now again, we'll find the basic facts and patterns. 4 times 1 is 4. Now let's count all the zeros. 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to put 1, 2, 3 at the end, at the end of my product, which means that in 4 meters, there are 4,000 millimeters. Okay, so don't forget, the only time you'll have to do that in this lesson is when you have length, because all the others, capacity and or volume and mass, we know exactly how many are in, that our chart tells us exactly how many of each unit, of each smaller unit are in the larger unit. So the only time you may have to go do multiple steps, like on number 12, is with length. Like if you know kilometers and you're trying to find centimeters, or millimeters, or if you know meters and you're trying to find millimeters. That's the only time you're going to have to do more than one step. So be watching out for that. Make sure that you do that. Okay, so now let's go ahead and look through the independent practice. Numbers 5 and 6 are conversion tables, so you'll do them the exact same way as you did numbers 1 through 4 in the guided practice. Don't forget to show those equations. Line them up. Numbers 7 through 18, you're going to do the same way that we did 7, 8, and 12. Most of them are only going to be one step, but be paying attention to see if you have to do more than one step, like in number 12. Let's see, 19 through 21, you're basically going to be using your conversion chart to answer that. It's like one of those how many times greater is this unit than this unit problem. So you're going to be using your conversion chart to solve those. Numbers 22 through 25 are word problems. Don't forget to show equations, and don't forget units. So you need equations and units. Make sure if you have to do one step or if you have to do multiple steps. Check on that. Number 26 is a reasoning problem, so you're trying to figure out what went wrong or what's different, and then explain it. And then number 27 is critical thinking, so that's where you take what you already knew, what you learned today in this lesson, and then you put it together to come up with a new answer in your own words. Okay, let's look at the homework. Numbers 1 through 6 are just like 7 through 18 on the independent practice. Don't forget to show your equation underneath, just like we did here. You have even more room on the homework page, so don't forget your equation and don't forget your unit. Do not forget that. Numbers 7 through 11 are word problems. You're going to solve them just like numbers 22 through 25 on the independent practice and like example 1. So make sure that you have an equation on that line. Make sure you have the answer. Make sure that you have the unit. Do not forget units. This is where it is extremely important to have units. Pay attention. Can you solve it in one step, or do you have to solve it in multiple steps like number 12? And then number 12 is, let's see, you're going to have to do a conversion. You can just do the conversion to the side. You can show that work in the My Workbox. Everything else on the homework, numbers 7 through 11, you're just going to show that equation on the line. It's going to be basic facts and patterns, so you won't have to set it up to the side. So you can just solve it right on that line. Number 12, you can solve in the My Workbox, because you might need some extra space just because there's not really much space around there. Okay, that's it for today's lesson. If you have any questions, please reach out to me today between 1 and 5. Again, you do not have to use a separate sheet of paper, but make sure you show all of your equations either underneath the problems, like these, or on the line for the word problems. Okay, go ahead and get started on the independent practice, and then go ahead and do the homework, or you can wait until later today to do that. Just make sure that if you have any problems, reach out to me. Don't just guess. You can ask me questions. Okay, go ahead and get started.